Hey friends, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, where our vision is for every child on the planet to have a church, access to the hope of Jesus. We're all about helping you start new, thriving, growing, multiplying churches that really go after the next generation. We have an amazing guest on the podcast this episode, my good friend Aaron Brockett. Aaron is the lead pastor of Traders Point Christian Church in Indianapolis. Since he joined the church in 2007, it has grown from 1,500 people in one location to nearly 10,000 people in 6 locations. And here's the amazing thing that we're going to talk about today. Aaron has done all of that while being an introverted leader. So how do you plant a church? How do you grow a church as an introvert? I'm thrilled to welcome and hope you'll join me in welcoming my good friend, Aaron Brockett, to the Church Planting Podcast. Hey, everyone. Wow, we have a very special guest, and I'm really excited because not only is he an amazing leader, but he's just a very close friend. We have a long history together. Aaron Brockett, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Greg. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be on.
Yeah, thanks so much. We had a long partnership together with Stadia, and just really you and I kind of grew up in leading church together. But we go a long way back. We actually met whitewater rafting. I don't even know how many years ago it was, Aaron. I still have a picture of us in the boat. Do you remember that?
Do you? Well, I know how many years ago it was because my 19-year-old daughter had just been born. So it was 19 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. And we were invited out in California of all the crazy things. Yeah. To whitewater raft together. And I remember Tim Harlow was on that trip with us, Greg Marksberry, Dusty Rubeck, though Dusty Rubeck wasn't on very long because he gashed an artery in the first hour.
Yeah, he was like in the boat for all of 60 seconds, I think, and split his leg
Very
open.
first rapid. But, it's kind of that spirit of adventure that I've watched in you over the years. And kind of give us an update. I mean, you're leading, what's considered one of the most high impact churches in the country these days that God's entrusted you with. And I know you view it that way. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, when you and I met, I was a struggling church planter. I had planted a church in Northern California. Was really beating my head against the wall. I think I was, how old would I have been? 26 years old, something like that at the time, I think, when you and I met. And I was contemplating the future, wondering, should I continue in this? And from that place, we were originally from the Midwest. We ended up moving back to the Midwest after we started having children. And so I not only planted a church, but then when Traders Point called me, Traders Point's a really old church. Like, it's on the other end of the spectrum. It was started in 1834. So I followed a long tenured, well-loved pastor in Howard Bramer. Howard had been here 25 years. And so I transitioned to church. And so planting a church and transitioning a church both have incredible challenges and opportunities. I found out I'm a better transitioner than I am a planner. I'd like to think that I would be a better planner now. But honestly, as we've just been doing like some of Lencioni's working genius stuff. And once I found out what my working genius was, I was like, that's why I struggled as a church planner, because I'm a wonderer, I'm a galvanizer, and I needed some other people in the mix to try to help execute that vision and mission. And so we've been at Traders Point it'll be 16 years this November. It's hard to believe. And it's been an absolutely wild ride. We've gone from, one location to soon to be 7. The very first location that we started back in 2016, that location alone is bigger than what the entire church was when I got here. So it's just, been an incredible ride. Get to do this with an amazing team. And what I love about serving in a large church now is that we get to resource church planting. And so it's kind of come full circle.
Yeah, you've been a church plant resource, through leadership, through finances, just through helping out on the podcast like today, really throughout the United States and around the world. Hey, I want to come back, though, to your planting days and this Lencioni stuff, because this is really good stuff. Talk about, not knowing what you know now, who would you have had on your team all those years ago at 26 years old?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I've been in ministry long enough to actually build out those relationships and that network to even know who I would have needed. But looking back in retrospect, I really needed somebody that was good at systems, somebody that could really take a vision and execute it. I could get up front, and I still to this day, I can get up front and preach vision, but then how do you actually put that on the ground and execute it is a totally different skill set. I think, given in light of the topic we're going to talk about today, just probably having somebody on my team that was just super, super relational and could build those relationships with people easily. And so I think just looking back in retrospect, just those pieces to the puzzle would have been so helpful.
Yeah. So looking at, it's one of the things that we look at a lot with church planners today is who do they have around them? What are their strengths and giftings? And then how can we help them build their team for greatest success? And, honestly, back 19 years ago, Aaron, there wasn't a lot of that going on looking at things like that. So it's kind of, I had the same thing. I went by myself and planted a church. Well, that's pretty stupid.
Yeah, they've taken all of your mistakes and all of my mistakes and turned them into policy.
It is completely true. If I'm actually headed to a discovery event in Chicago on Monday, Aaron, and I'm not even sure I would make it through discovery today.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't make it through our interview
Okay,
process.
so let's get into today's topic because it is fascinating. So you're plant a church, but I think, really what I've watched as you've matured is you led a long time in really a successful church to transition from a long time leadership role and to, I guess the best way to say it is become, to revitalize itself, to refresh itself, to reinvigorate itself for the future and to move into a whole different realm of impact. And you did that all from a position of being an introvert. Now, let me just ask. I mean, honestly, when I was back starting River Tree and stuff, I mean, I don't even know that I ever thought about extrovert, introvert. Is this something that you knew 20 years ago, or is it something that more recent you've become aware of and learned more about?
No, I think that I became aware of it when I was in college. So, I don't know that prior to that, people would tell me that I was shy or tell me that maybe I was antisocial. They would say those types of things. It wasn't until I got into college that the word introvert was first introduced to me. And I wasn't quite fully sure what to do with it at the time. And I think even in my early days in ministry, I would offend people because they wanted me to be more personable. Maybe they had a certain idea that the pastor was going to be the most relational person in the room. Or they would see me, up front, and most introverts that are really good communicators come across as extroverts as they're communicating. Johnny Carson was a introvert, but, and then they would get together with me or they would go on a mission trip and they would be kind of offended. Like, you're not that same kind of warm guy. And so I think it was really, it really knocked me off, my equilibrium a little bit. I think I was confused by it, in the early days. And so I think I've had to grow in my emotional intelligence, my EQ to really know what it's like to be on the other side of me and to make some adjustments around that.
Okay, so let's talk about what are some of the challenges of leading kind of from the front seat of the bus as an introvert? What are some things you've run into that you go, yeah, that's a little more challenging, that would be helpful to church planters or church leaders right now?
Well, building relationships, being clear about expectations, having energy management, which is really what's at the core of, I think, introversion and extroversion, is that really this is, I think, I'm sure your listeners are going to be really astute to all of this, but it's not that extroverts love people and introverts don't. It's that most introverts that I know love people. It's just that our battery runs down while being with people. and extrovert's battery kind of charges up with people. So for me, it's like, just knowing when I'm going to need to be at a full-time staff meeting this morning. So I spent pretty much the whole morning kind of by myself, kind of charging up so that I could be fully present with our team, in a big room full of people. So energy management, clarity of expectation, just anticipating what it is that other people need from me as a leader so that I'm not caught off guard by that.
Okay, let me ask you this. So you work with elderships or your management team as a church planter and so forth. Did you ever run into where your elders are going, hey man, you need to be with people more?
I've never had elders tell me I need to be with people more. I have had elders tell me that I needed to be more personable with them. And that actually kind of rocked me back a little bit, kind of like, hey, we need you to be a little bit more pastoral with us. We need we need to know that you care about us, sort of a thing. So I have had that happen before.
Yeah. So we're going to run into some things where, we've got to learn along the way, right? And then educate people along the way, kind of about what our strengths and weaknesses are and what we bring to the table. So let's talk about energy management. The reality is if you're a church planter, you're a church leader, you're in the people business. That's what, well, honestly, if you're a follower of Jesus, right, you're in the people business. What are some things you do to manage that energy?
Well, I think first of all, you can't have the attitude of like, well, I'm an introvert. They're just going to need to deal with it. Yeah. Now you can set up appropriate boundaries. You can, balance, make sure your schedule is aligned, make sure you're taking care of yourself physically. But I know a lot of guys, they're like, feel this. I certainly felt this pressure because the whole class of church planners that I planted with, I think most of those guys were extroverts and they loved having people over. And Lindsay and I, are kind of like our house is like sort of our sacred space, and having people over is so draining. We love it, but it's so draining. So that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it the way that they would do it. But I do think you need to figure out, okay, how will we do it? Because as you said, ministry is about people. Now, my personal opinion, and I don't have any way to prove this, but my personal opinion is that Jesus was an introvert. And the reason why I would say that is because he was always retreating. It's like after he got done teaching, he's taken off. He's getting in the boat, going to the other side of the lake. And if he was an extrovert, there's just something that tells me he wouldn't have done that. And so if Jesus could do that, knowing that, he still needed to be with people, we can do that as well. And so I think we're just going to have to get really smart about how do we manage our energy? At what time of the day am I at my best? At what time of the day am I not? Am I getting enough sleep? What's my nutrition look like? How am I intentionally building relationships? And what set of relationships is this absolutely vital that I'm the one making these types of investments? And then what are some other relationships that I can maybe delegate to the team of people that are around me?
Okay. So a couple things out of that. Let's talk about Jesus a little bit, because I was just reading in the Gospel of Luke this morning, and I actually underlined in my, I use a hard copy Bible and note takers, and I underlined because it said, and Jesus went to the mount, he had been teaching all day, and it said, then he went to the Mount of Olives, and there were two words at the end of the sentence that I underlined. It just said, as usual.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Part of this routine.
So I think it would be fascinating for our leader. So whether you're extrovert or introvert, and we're following the example of Jesus, right? Jesus was taking time away from the crowds as usual. And so I think that's really important. The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about your house being a sacred place. So you and I have a mutual friend named Ben Kacharis, who leads a high impact church up in Baltimore. And Ben, I don't even know what to do with this, but Ben was telling me, at River Tree, when I was senior pastor there, when it came Easter weekend, I'd be preaching 5, 6, 7 times, and I'd be exhausted. By the time Sunday afternoon came, all I wanted to do was crash. And Ben's like, yeah, on Sunday afternoon, right after church, the last service, everybody come, our entire staff, we have 50 people come to our house and we have a picnic. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Have you ever met, that's the extrovert energy, right?
Yeah, he's the machine, and he kind of makes me sick. Yeah. Yeah. It's unbelievable. No, but Ben's just a great people person, but he energizes from it. Yeah.
Have you ever felt, I mean, did you struggle with any of that with an inadequacy kind of experience going,
Yeah,
oh man, I wish I had that kind of energy?
absolutely. I think there's an element, I feel kind of ashamed, or I kind of feel guilty, like that I want to retreat, or that, hey man, I really need this time to myself. Because I think it really is easy to look at the extroverts in the room or the extroverts in ministry and to see what they're doing and really kind of feel like, man, that's what I should be doing too. I should be with people. And I really envy, guys like Ben and there's a bunch of others, extroverts. I just really envy their people skills. And I can get to the place now where I can walk into a room. I didn't used to be able to pick up on this, but now when I walk into a room, I know when I'm being introverted. And there's a lot of me that's like, okay, Brockett, you are being introverted right now. You need to pick it up. And I don't know what to do. And that's so frustrating. And I can feel the tension off the other people in the room, or that maybe even say little things and little comments. And so, trying to figure that out is, I think it's a bit of a lifelong struggle, but I think learning to be, one of the things that I've kind of found is that when I'm in a setting like that, as quickly as I can, get vulnerable about that and kind of tell the other people in the group, like, hey guys, I know that I'm a little bit quiet, or I know I'm a little bit reserved. Hey, here's what I'm doing. And actually I'm a part of a pastor's cohort. Like the first 3 or 4 cohort gatherings we got together with, they were asking me afterwards, like, do you like coming to this? I'm like, of course I love coming to it. And they're like, well, we can't tell. And my wife actually said to them, he wouldn't show up if he didn't want to come to this and be a part of it. And so I think just knowing how I can kind of be perceived, has helped me grow, I think, a little bit. And even just ahead of time, just if I know I'm going to be with a big group of people a day or two before, I'm like already kind of, doing what I need to do to manage my energy levels and to know how I need to show up to that, just to avoid misunderstanding.
Okay. So Aaron, I have to tell you something before I change the direction of this conversation. It's become a kind of a joke around Stadia. They call it the Irish departure of Greg Nettle. So we do a lot of cohorts and stuff, and I'm with boards and management teams, and we could be out around the fire pit at night, and I'm leading all the questions and the conversations, and no joke, man, it'll hit about 10 o'clock. And I'll just walk in the house and go to bed. And I just don't tell people. I just leave.
That's right.
Or sometimes I'll just say, hey, I love you all. But I know that if I don't get appropriate sleep tonight, I'm not going to be worth anything with you tomorrow. So stay up as long as you want to. Mm-hmm. But it really helps if I actually just clarify, I like you all. I wish I could stay up till midnight and 1 a.m. with you chatting, but I won't be worth anything tomorrow.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just being able to be clear
I'm going to completely
about it, I think it's huge.
Well, it's like your wife saying he wouldn't be here if he didn't want to be here, right? Okay, I want to shift gears completely now because we've been kind of talking about the challenges and so forth. And I actually have some books on my shelf about introverted leadership and stuff. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff written recently, podcasts, TED Talks about the strengths of leading as an introvert. So talk a little bit about what do you bring to the table as an introvert leader, maybe that people aren't even aware of?
Well, I think maybe 2 of the things that immediately pop into my mind is just a little bit, it's just a little bit easier for me to be disciplined, to study and prepare and think. I do some of my best thinking alone. And so I know there's a lot of extroverts, and I don't want to categorize them or stereotype them, but I do know some extroverts struggle a little bit with that because they're always wanting to be with people. And so maybe their sermon prep time, their strategy prep time, their thinking time gets a little bit short circuited because they're always with people. The second thing that I would say is that, just recognizing the sheer numbers of introverts that are in your church. That and even like the very large church setting is really kind of geared for extroverts, and there's a lot of introverts that kind of feel unseen, or how do I connect here? I'm not that gregarious person. And I think when I've been able to say up front, I mean, my whole church knows I'm introverted. So when I say it up front, I've had a lot of introverts go, man, that gives me a lot of encouragement to know that if you can do this as an introvert, then maybe I can be a part of a place like this as an introvert as well.
Yeah, but I mean, I've been around you a lot over the years, and kind of as I get to know you, I mean, you're one of the most personable, enjoyable. I mean, I love being around you, but partly that's because of the depth of the conversation when you're comfortable with people, right? And I think that comes out of, I mean, still waters run deep. That's an old saying, but I think there's a lot of truth to that. So like leading staff, talk about, with your introversion, talk about things that you do that to build those relationships with staff, because at the end of the day, introverted leaders still are going to interact with staff in a very strong way.
Absolutely. As much as I possibly can, I'm going to try to be as visible as I can. Walking the hallways, hey, let me just kind of, between meetings, let me take the long way around. Go down the hallway and never rarely go in. If I see an open office door, maybe pop in and say hello and try to start a conversation, ask them what they're doing and how they're doing. Periodically, different departments will have me in just to 45 minutes to an hour, like Q&A kind of roundtable with the team. And so it doesn't have to be anything super formal. It could be ministry related. It could be personal life. It could be anything. And I found those to be really enriching, where I can just kind of go in, let my hair down, be a regular guy, let the staff ask me and the team ask me any questions. I'm asking them questions. It gives us a chance to communicate that way. So I think you've got to be intentional about it. I think more than anything, because I think most of the time, most leaders that I know, they're not desiring to isolate themselves from the team. They're just not necessarily being intentional about pursuing conversation with the team. And, our staff at times, God love them, they don't always make it easy for you, because, like when I walk into our staff meeting, oftentimes like the table I sit at, nobody wants to sit at it with me, and then you find out about it. Like, well, we just didn't want to bother you. We know you're busy. And it's like, guys, sometimes how pastors get into trouble is we get isolated in the ivory tower. Sometimes the staff pushes us into that unintentionally. I think they mean well, but I think we have to be extend as much effort as we can to get out of isolation, by pursuing those relationships and conversations with the team.
And so I just want to, there was a gem that you threw in there, Aaron, that I want to just kind of reemphasize, the idea of intentionality. Again, because whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you can have interactions with people. But as an introvert, what I'm hearing you say is that if there's an intentionality to the interaction, it can actually be even more meaningful than just energizing off of people.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, being able to, man, I try to work really, really hard at memorizing people's names. And that can be really challenging when you're dealing with lots and lots of people, but not only memorizing their names, but as much as possible, like spouse names and kids names. And because it's just that little like extra touch, or like if a staff person comes to me and says, hey, my wife is really struggling with her health. And I'm trying to remember that. And like the next time around, man, how's your wife's health doing? Just those like little touches. And you're not trying to pretend to be somebody that you're not. It's just those holding on to those little things to say, man, I genuinely really do care about you. And that means a lot with the next time you interact with them, when you can recall that.
Yeah, that's genius, man. Now, I watch you. I see some of your posts on Instagram and different places, and like you recharge. It looks to me like you recharge in nature quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, going on walks. We've got a little bit of space out where we're at. And so I try to get outside. I try to exercise as much as I can. That just really kind of refills my tank, gets me in the right kind of headspace. And I've started to take like my physical health really seriously in the last few years. mostly around that purpose of going the distance. And I just found that I'm just a better leader when I physically take care of myself. And sometimes what I thought was like stress load or maybe spiritual attack was really just, I just wasn't taking very good care of myself. And so I just want to show up and be my absolute best. And I want to do this as long as I possibly can. And so making sure, I don't do early morning meetings. And I know so that frustrates some people. I don't do breakfast meetings with people. I don't do any meeting before, but the earliest I'll ever do a meeting is probably 10 a.m. Most of the time it's later than that because my mornings are sacred. My mornings are time with the Lord. My mornings are quiet times. My mornings when I do my best thinking. My mornings are when I work out. And then it's like 11 to 3 is people time. That's like meetings, conversations, dialogue. Then 3 to dinner time is going to be emails, paperwork, study time, all that kind of a stuff that, and the right before I can just like shut it off around 5 or 5:30 and then be with my family for the rest of the evening. So my assistant knows to not even come to me with meetings now that may start before 10 a.m.
Dude, that's gold right there. You saved it for the end of the podcast. Thank you. Thank you so much, Aaron, for being on the podcast. And it is we did record this after 3:00, which just fit right into the schedule that you were sharing. I love you, brother. I'm grateful for your partnership. Thanks for being on the Church Planting Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast. The Church Planting Podcast is part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.